I think that the Occupy Wall Street protest could actually be good for the Tea Party. And there's an article out on Mother Jones, which is pretty fascinating. And I don't really like that this is the case, but I have to agree. And let's be honest, the media coverage of Occupy Wall Street did not really transcend crossover into mainstream corporate media until the arrest started. And we knew that would happen. Corporate mainstream media shares a lot of the same interests as the Wall Street companies that are the subject of the protests. Therefore, you were only going to see real coverage of Occupy Wall Street when the arrest started and the protesters could appear to be hipsters, weed-smoking hipsters with no jobs, right? In comparison, this is making the Tea Party appear like they're the calm, rational protesters. Nobody's getting arrested. They have these very calm protests, very well attended. But wait a second. Let's think about this for a second. The reason the Tea Party was perceived so positively was because they would have a 25 or 50 person rally, and Fox News would cover it like the Million Man March. Mm. Am I off on this, Daryl?
No, not at all. Not at all. They would cover it like it was the most major event happening, and most of the people didn't even know it was even going on.
That's exactly right. And
they're the PR. They're the PR department for the Tea Party.
So I actually think that, Natan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and also the demands that the Tea Party movement was making coincide with corporate interests. So, they then sort of co-opted, the whole movement, and it's totally different than the Wall Street protest.
The Tea Party movement did not only have interests that coincided with corporate interests, they had interests that didn't even coincide with the protesters, right? I mean, you had Tea Party protesters suggesting policies that were against their own best interests. And they got the coverage. They were the media darlings. It was constant Tea Party coverage, even when the Tea Party faded, even when the Tea Party was doing nothing. Occupy Wall Street is making the Tea Party look even better. And I'm wondering, even though when you actually, if you look at polls and you ask people, do you agree with A, B, C statement that the Occupy Wall Street protests stand for? An overwhelming number of people actually do agree, whereas an overwhelming number of Americans don't agree with what the Tea Party was protesting for. But if you look at the media coverage, you would think that the Tea Party is just this incredible, organized group of nice people doing absolutely nothing wrong, whereas the Occupy Wall Street protesters are getting in the way of police and they're just doing everything wrong. And it couldn't be further from the reality that the Occupy Wall Street protest actually represents the interests of the majority of Americans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That I couldn't have said better myself.
Here's another thing. We keep talking about, can we contextualize the police acting with a lot of force videos in any way that would make their actions appear acceptable? And a couple of shows ago, we talked, Daryl, about some of the videos where we see an incredible amount of violence. And we basically said, we can't think of anything other than, and now we have the picture here, of course, of the infamous police car bowel movement from Occupy Wall Street. We have nothing that we can think of other than the protester said, I have a gun and I'm about to take it out, that would make the actions legitimate. I have some video here that I'm going to play for you, and audio, of Dwight Harris, a wheelchair-bound man who was body slammed by police out of his wheelchair, started to bleed on the ground to the point of needing stitches. Again, can we create some kind of context that would legitimize this action? Let's take a look. All right, let me back it up. I'll play the key moment here. And just look, I don't know. I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the police officers, who, by the way, are not going to be charged with anything. What could have happened here that would make sense to cause two police officers to take a wheelchair-bound man who can't even walk and slam him on the ground violently? Let's look again. Okay. I don't know. I really don't know. Natan, you seem to want to defend the police on these. What could we consider here? What maybe happened that would make this be logical?
I can't think of any situation where, unless he had a gun. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he didn't have a gun. Right?
What he did was he was drinking in public, I believe. That's what I read. That was the actual charge. He supposedly assaulted at least one of the officers. The video doesn't show that. The video really doesn't show that. If we say, well, listen, anytime you start resisting, if you start turning away from the police, Daryl, as people often do, and then it makes the police escalate to the next level, you're resisting arrest and then it's open game. But okay, but slamming a wheelchair-bound man on the ground, I just can't think of anything. I don't want to be going after these police officers, but I just can't think of what would legitimize this action.
The only thing I can think of would be if he really was in the wheelchair faking. But if that guy is really restricted to that wheelchair, he's not a threat like most people would be. You might still need to put the cuffs on him. You might need to escort him out of that chair onto the floor or onto the ground in this case. But the way they slugged that man out of that chair and threw him down on the ground, there's absolutely no explanation for that other than him having some sort of a weapon that they quickly needed to get away from him. And I don't think that that was the case.
If he did have that, it would have been mentioned at some point in the charges against him, which, by the way, have been dropped not long after the cell phone video showed up on YouTube. The drinking charge was dropped as well. The guy needed stitches, and he had blood pouring out of his head on the ground. And this just it's incredible to me. We did also hear from the Department of Justice spokesperson who said that after interviewing a bunch of people and looking at medical reports and video, that this does not indicate any kind of criminal action by the police officers that warrants an investigation. My question is, who's next? A completely paralyzed man? I mean, is a quadriplegic going to be slammed to the ground because he was doing something? A guy who can't even move? I don't understand what's the next step here. Where are we going? And what direction are we going with this police action? And again, most police officers don't do this type of thing. Most police officers are respectable men and women who are doing their job for all the right reasons and who in reality sympathize with the Occupy Wall Street movement. But I don't know what is next. I'm just not even surprised by these videos anymore, Daryl.
Yeah, no, I am. I guess we're in a different league there. This shocked me. I really just saw this for the first time just a few minutes ago, and it was shocking to me. This appalls me. And I'm not a person against the police either. I would not want to be a police officer because I wouldn't want to be in this situation. But looking at the situation, there's nothing that in my brain that can justify that outside of a weapon. Even a bad day. That's crazy.
On today's bonus show, we'll be talking about a home that was raided after they put up a sign saying heroin for sale. There's also some strange reality show video of a man who's incredibly afraid of a tiny puppy. And we're going to talk about what's the effect on society of these reality shows. We'll also talk about the Anthony Weiner campaign, still spending money even though he's been gone for months. So make sure to get access to that bonus show at davidpakman.com. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.